The Atlanta Braves have seen several star franchise, even players, leave in free agency over the last several off seasons. While some of those decisions are understandable and justified, what impact, if any, could that be having in the clubhouse? What impact is that having with the fans? We'll discuss all that on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastriani, and you can follow me on social media at ShortstopBall. Check out the podcast at LockedOn_Braves. If you're new and watching this on YouTube, please do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. And if you've already done that, hit the thumbs up button and leave me a comment down below. It doesn't take that long, and it helps me out a ton whenever you do that. If you listen on the audio version, you can help out by leaving me a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. And thank you so much for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. On today's podcast, we're going to have a little bit more of a conversation. We're going to talk about the recent decisions by the Atlanta Braves not to bring back some of their franchise players, some players that were with the Braves for a while, fan favorites, and letting them walk in free agency. What impact, if any, has that had in the clubhouse? What impact is that having on the fan base? So we're going to get into a deep dive of that. We'll also look at some big contracts that have been signed and how they have worked out. Should the Braves be taking that risk on doing some of these big free agent deals that we've seen other teams doing? And got a small, another depth move that the Atlanta Braves have made. That seems to be all they're doing so far this offseason. So a lot to touch on. And again, a lot of conversation. So jump in, get ready to go. Leave your comments in the comments section down below, because I think this is one that's going to be heavily opinionated. Certainly by me, and I want to hear your thoughts as well, because I do think it's important to look at as we see a lot of these players going in free agency now that we have seen. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. So as I said, today's podcast is going to be a little bit more conversational. I don't know exactly where I'm going to go with this, even as I record right now. But this is something I've been thinking about for a while, and actually had a listener ask this question or something similar to this in Friday's mailbag episode. And I had already planned on kind of doing something like this. But in the past 4 off seasons, we have seen Freddie Freeman walk in free agency. We've seen Dansby Swanson walk in free agency. And now we have seen Max Fried walk in free agency. And again, there are justified reasons for some of those, for why it happened. And we'll talk about that. It's also just disheartening as a fan. And I want to talk about that as well. I mean, these are 3 players that I consider franchise players. You cannot talk about the history of the Atlanta Braves without talking about a Freddie Freeman who won an MVP, who won a World Series, without a Dansby Swanson, who the Braves traded for to be kind of the spark of that rebuild. Yes, I know he ultimately wasn't that first overall pick type of player with the Atlanta Braves, but he was certainly a leader for that team. And a guy in Max Fried, which I think is the trade that kind of started the rebuild, getting an ace like Max Fried, who's finished top 5 in Cy Young Award vote twice now, who pitched Game 6 of the World Series. I mean, these are franchise players that have some iconic moments in Braves history that spent a lot of time with the Atlanta Braves, and all of them leave in free agency. Again, what type of impact has this had in the clubhouse? What type of impact has it had with the fan base? And I want to know your opinion as I go through this, because again, a lot of this is going to be opinion based, because we don't necessarily have the evidence to show what type of effect this has had. But I see somebody asking about a Ronald Acuna Jr. We all know, and we're all preparing for it, that when this deal is up, he's going to leave in free agency. I mean, just prepare yourself for it now. And that's just kind of where we are as a fan base and where we are as a team in the way that this front office operates. Now, before we dive any deeper into the Freddie Freeman, Swanson, and Max Fried situations, we have to get one thing clear first, in that the Freddie Freeman situation and the Swanson and Fried situations are 2 totally different situations. I don't want to go too deep into the Freddie Freeman situation because I feel like I've done it a lot and most of you probably already know, but there was a lot that happened in that offseason. You had the lockout, so you had a short time frame to get something done. You had Freddie's agent that kind of messed him up, leading to Freddie ultimately firing that agent who allegedly gave Alex Anthopoulos an ultimatum. That's not going to go over well with Alex Anthopoulos. He didn't meet that. Alex felt like he had to pivot and get something done or else risk not getting anything. And in the end, the Dodgers gave a similar, some would say worse deal than what the Braves had offered Freddie Freeman. A lot going on with that situation. Freddie Freeman wanted to come back. He should have come back. If he picked up a phone call or made a phone call to Alex, he would have been back. If Alex would have just given him a 6-year, which he should have, Freddie would be back. That's a completely different situation than what happened with Dansby and Fried, where they just had, especially in the case for Dansby, he had a great contract year and got overpaid by the Cubs, who were looking to kind of restart their winning ways in Chicago, and they wanted to build that around Dansby, who's a proven winner. You can say whatever you want about his on-field contributions. Dansby Swanson is a winner. He won in college. He won at the major league level. He's a winner. And for Max Fried, it's just this market, as we talked about this offseason, was crazy, and it blew up his price to something the Braves were never going to offer, and only a few teams could offer. So again, different situations when we're talking about what happened. But I think that's all kind of beside the point. And what I want to get into more later is the fact that you can't get to free agency. If you get to free agency with the Braves, like these players, you're going to be gone. That's what we have learned with these three players. Now let's start with the fan base here. And this is where I'm going to need your opinions on this and how this has personally made you feel going through this as a Braves fan and seeing Freddie Freeman, Dansby, and Max Fried all just walk in free agency and go to other teams. Now, as fans, sometimes we, and I throw myself in there, we can be irrational and fall in love with a player and think that they are better than they actually are. I see Neil White saying that Dansby is not a star. I do not disagree with you. But I think he's a perfect example of this because I loved Dansby Swanson. I loved him before the breakout season that he had in his contract year. I've always loved Dansby Swanson as somebody who enjoys the shortstop position. It's in my handle on X. He is somebody that I love to watch play shortstop because just of the instincts that he had and how well he plays the position, as evidenced by winning a Gold Glove. And that's really what has carried him the first 2 years in Chicago, where he hasn't been that great offensively. I just loved watching him as a player because, like I said, I think he has a winning mentality. I love to watch him play defense. And it felt like he always came up big in clutch situations. So again, I loved Dansby Swanson, but you take a step back from that and you take your bias out of it. Dansby only had one season above 3 WAR before his contract year, where he had over 6 WAR, which is going to be an outlier for him. He wasn't that good. He wasn't great. I should say that. He was good. He wasn't great. Not an all-star, as Neil White says. Not that level of player. Dansby's highest, like I said, F4 before going into 2022 was 3.3. And even then, it was mostly carried by his defense. He had a 99 WRC plus, but it was mostly carried by his defense, or his Fangraphs WAR was mostly carried by his defense. Again, that's 99 WRC plus. That's just below league average at 100. So what Dansby provided you, which again, it was valuable. And I would love to have Dansby right now. I would love to have him over Orlando Arcia. But I feel like as a Braves fan, myself included, we probably overvalue Dansby because he was ours. He was the guy that we went out and got. He was our shortstop. He was our leader, and he helped bring us to a World Series. And I say that to say that fans can sometimes get irrationally attached to a player. And it's not based in necessarily performance all the time, but it's just based in how you feel. And the job of the GM is to sometimes put that aside and remain, a neutral, unbiased party to make business decisions like that. Dansby Swanson was not worth 170 whatever million that he got from the Cubs. He just wasn't. I mean, that's what the Cubs are willing to pay him, but that's not reflective of the type of player that he is. He should not be making that type of money. I guess it's not fair to me to say because the Cubs are willing to pay him that much, but he had really done nothing up to that point to say that he was that type of player. So again, as fans, I think we sometimes get irrationally attached to players. Now, next, I want to talk about what this means for the clubhouse, lessons that we've learned so far from this, and what is the fan response going forward, because I think this is going to be very interesting to watch going into 2025. We're already kind of seeing it a little bit. And of course, now you had the FanFest get canceled. Don't want to make too big of a deal out of that, but it does kind of tie in to where I'm wanting to go with this conversation tonight. And we'll get into that here next. You shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event, and you don't when you use Gametime. Gametime is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. They have killer last-minute deals. You can filter it so you get the all-in price right there. You know what you're paying before you get to the checkout screen, and you can get a view from your seat so you know exactly what it's going to look like, and you get the Gametime guarantee. That means you always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. I'm getting ready to go to a bowl game in my area right now. I'm constantly checking the Gametime app, looking for the best deals. They have the Gametime picks. They're going to filter it to give you what they think are the best deals for that event. And again, you get that all right there in the app on one screen. It's very easy to use. So download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today at last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Well, thanks as always for making Locked On Braves your first listen of the day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen. Solely getting caught up with everything else happening around Major League Baseball. All right, I want to jump back in this conversation because I had a lot more to say on this. We talked about kind of the fallout from the fans, or not necessarily the fallout, but maybe some of the reaction from the fans. We get attached to these players. We want to see them here forever. I wanted to see Freddie Freeman be the next Chipper Jones, and he should have been. You know, I wanted to see Dansby Swanson stay here and finish his career with the Atlanta Braves. Obviously, what happened in free agency, he just couldn't pass that up. I'd have loved to see Max Fried stay around, but it just wasn't going to work out. The Braves weren't willing to pay that, and I guess that's part of the question we're asking: should the Braves be willing to pay that? Now, what about the clubhouse? This is where I'm going to have to do some speculation. I can tell you how I feel as a fan and how these decisions have impacted me. And you can tell me how these decisions have impacted you. What I can't necessarily quantify yet is what this means in the clubhouse. And is it possible that seeing these franchise players walk away has affected the clubhouse dynamic? Certainly both Freddie and Dansby, they were leaders on this team, having gone through the rebuild, being part of the 21 team that won a World Series. I would imagine there's a lot of current players on this roster that looked up to those two guys, and them not being there had some sort of impact. Now, in terms of on-field results, the Braves have won 101, 104, and 89 games, making the playoffs all 3 years, winning the division twice since Freddie Freeman left. So on-field doesn't really seem to affect them too much. However, they've also been bounced in the first round of the postseason every year. In the division round once after skipping the wild card, and then last year, obviously, getting eliminated in the wild card round. They have not advanced in the postseason since 2021, which is obviously the last year with Freddie and the year that they won it all. So again, that's hard to quantify. While maybe the results and poor performance on the field hasn't reflected this, I have to imagine that there's some level of frustration with Braves players, current players, and thinking, man, that guy did a lot for this franchise. The Braves will let him get to free agency and let him go to the Dodgers, who are now winning World Series with their guy. You don't think that stings Austin Riley a little bit? You don't think that stings a guy like Max Fried, who just left in free agency too? Again, I'm speculating here. My opinion, I don't know. I have not been able to ask these guys that, and I don't know that you'd get a real answer even if you did. But it would hurt me a little bit. You know, if I come up with Freddie Freeman, he is here, he is a Brave, and he helps me win a World Series, and then you let him walk to the rival Dodgers, who then go on to win a World Series with him while you're getting bounced in the first round every year. Again, as a fan, I know that stings. And I would have to imagine as a player, that probably stings a little bit too. But look, Chipper told Freddie, and you even heard it today. I think it was on Fair Territory. I don't know, Fair, Foul Territory, whatever it's called, the podcast over there. He was on Monday. He talked about this too, the fact that he took less money to stay with the Braves because it was going to help them make other moves. He didn't necessarily in this conversation say that he did it, for the Braves or like they asked him to do that. But we do know that he basically told Freddie Freeman that. He said, hey, you want to be with the Braves, you're going to have to take a little less. And he said, if you get to free agency, you're likely going to be gone. And it's exactly what happened. So Chipper knew, you want to be a Brave, you want to stay in Atlanta, this is what you have to do. And players know that. Players know that now. So what impact is that having on the next young player that comes up who maybe they want to be a Brave for life? Maybe they want to stay in Atlanta. They love it here, but they know if I don't sign an extension before I get to free agency, they're not going to bring me back. You could see the emotion from a Max Fried at the end of last year, both his last, home start that he had and the postseason start. You could see it really in that last home start that he had. You could see the emotion on Max Fried's face. He knew that was it because he knew, I'm assuming at some point they had contract extension discussions and it wasn't anywhere close to what Max Fried knew he was likely to get in free agency. Max Fried knew that he was gone. He knew they're not going to pay up to keep me in free agency. Again, what effect does that have in the clubhouse for guys to know I've given a lot to this franchise? Max Fried gave a lot to this franchise, but he knew if he got to free agency, he was gone. He just knew the Braves weren't going to be the highest bidder. And look, I'm not sitting here trying to say that's right or wrong. I think as a business, like I said, I wouldn't have overpaid for Dansby Swanson. I wouldn't have paid what Max Fried ultimately got, which, by the way, that deal hasn't become official yet. Don't want to throw out rumors or speculation, but is there something going on with that physical? Just dropping that news there because I've seen it kind of floating around here. But I wouldn't have paid that for Max Fried. So again, as a business decision, I understand why they wouldn't bring back. And from all we know, Dansby tried as best as he could to give the Braves a chance. Unlike Freddie Freeman, who didn't pick up the phone and call Alex, which I get it. There was a lockout. You couldn't do it for a while there. But once the lockout was lifted, make a phone call to Alex and say, what do I have to do to stay in Atlanta? Dansby at least did that. Dansby at least called Alex and stayed in communication with him, trying to stay in Atlanta. The Cubs offered way more money than the Braves were willing to offer. And it was just too big of a difference for Dansby to put all that money on the table. We're talking about $50 million, that he was going to have to leave on the table in order to stay in Atlanta. So again, what is this saying to players on the current team, knowing that, you might give 6-7 years to this franchise. You might love it here. You might want to be here. But if I get to free agency, they're not going to pay up to keep me. They're not going to have the highest offer on the table. And again, business-wise, I understand it. The Freddie Freeman situation notwithstanding, he should still be here. He should be an Atlanta Brave for life. That debacle, again, not going down that road, but for at least Dansby and Max, I understand. They got offered way above what they were valued as, and Alex isn't going to go that way. And the current roster is basically full of guys who said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and take these extensions now. And that's why they're here. Because if they didn't, look, Ronald would already be getting close to being gone. Ozzie would be gone. All these guys would be gone, except they took those early team-friendly extensions. And it's just kind of what you have to know if you're going to play for the Braves is that at some point, if you want to stay here long-term, as Chipper said, you're going to have to take less money or you're going to have to sign an extension to be here long-term. You get to free agency and you're gone. Austin Riley is probably going to be the next Chipper in terms of someone who spent their entire career in Atlanta as he's under team control through 2023. That's an option year when he'll be 36. So I think Austin can be that guy. So, some have asked me, is there going to be that guy that, like Chipper, who's going to be here for their entire career? Riley is the one in line for that just because of his extension, how long it was, and how old he'll be when it comes up. But I don't see it happening much anymore. Maybe Michael Harris because he's an Atlanta guy. Look, It could happen, but you're going to have to take a discount. And that's just the truth of the matter. If you want to be a Brave for life, you're going to have to take a discount. You're going to have to take less money to be here long term. And so, look, I still think Atlanta is a place that a lot of players want to be. But I would also have to imagine that seeing the way things have played out with Freddie, with Dansby, with Freed, that it's tarnished some of that. Not to mention this offseason alone, you've essentially seen the Braves spurn veterans like Travis d'Arnaud and possibly Charlie Morton. And look, I'm not trying to advocate that either of those guys should have come back, but those were clubhouse leaders. Once again, like Freddie, like Dansby, those were clubhouse leaders and veterans on this team who still wanted to keep playing, who still could have had a spot on this team. Travis is a backup. Yeah, you could diminish him a little bit and let Murphy, take over that full-time role, but you decided to let them go. Again, Morton, we don't really know yet, but reports are that the Braves don't seem that interested in bringing him back. Again, it feels like a bad trend that the Braves have of not, I don't know the right word to say here. Respect is probably not the right word, but not respecting guys who have given so much to your franchise. And look, that's where, as I talked about in the first segment, I have to step back as a fan. I'm sitting here thinking these guys gave so much. Why would you let them go? Let them stay around? As a business person, as Alex is, it might not always be the best move to bring guys back just because what they've done for you. Alex is looking, what will they do for us going forward? And that's where the disconnect is between fans and a GM. A GM is looking, what is this guy going to do for me in his 30s, and not looking at what did this guy do for me in his 20s. And a GM has to be able to sit back and make that decision. But again, you're just seeing it happen over and over again. These franchise players for the Braves, they get to free agency, they're not coming back. And I don't know that I'll have time to get to everything that I want to, but I do want to talk about the FanFest situation next and how I think all of this could be affecting the Braves' attendance and money going forward, because that is a big deal. So we'll discuss that here next. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. In fact, the Falcons are playing right now as we're recording. Got a 7-3 lead on the Raiders. I'm not an NFL expert, but aren't the Raiders bad? I don't know what's going on with the Falcons. I watched a couple of games early in the year, but haven't watched much since then. But again, you can see all that at FanDuel.com. They also have 2025 odds out for Major League Baseball as well, if you want to check all that out at FanDuel.com. And again, you get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Also, make sure you visit FanDuel.com/play-safe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way that you play. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. The World Series, Super Bowl, the Olympics, the world's top athletes get to play in these top-level sporting events thanks to one thing: teamwork. And teamwork can also protect your financial legacy and your family's future. SelectQuote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can find you the right policy to keep your financial legacy safely in your family's end zone. In sports, winning is everything. That's why you always need a good strategy to keep you moving towards the goalpost. Winning strategies for life are just as important, and that's where SelectQuote can help you protect your legacy and your family's financial future. SelectQuote is one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, helping over 2 million customers find over $700 billion in coverage since 1985. Get the right life insurance for you for less at SelectQuote.com/lockedon. Go to SelectQuote.com/lockedon today to get started. That's SelectQuote.com/lockedon. All right, let's jump back into the discussion here, and I want to finish it off with this. I wanted to get into long-term contracts, but we won't really have time for that. I'll say this about long-term contracts. You can go read this article from Sarah Langs on MLB.com, where she shows every team's largest contract, both in free agency and extension. And you can kind of go to that list, and and see for yourself how some of those have worked out. But looking at just the largest contracts ever handed out by each team, I went through that list and, determined which one worked out well, which one was awful, and some of those that are just in the middle. And the way it kind of broke down is that 7 to 8 of those big contracts that were handed out were great deals. And then there's 8 to 9 that are just plain bad and awful. And then the rest are okay or fine. So again, kind of just playing those odds. Whenever you sign one of these long contracts, these big deals, these franchise record-setting deals, you got about a 30% chance of it actually being good, and you got a 30% chance of it just being awful. Again, you look at one like Corey Seager, which is hard to really determine because the Rangers won a World Series, but that deal looks like it is going to be an anchor for years to come, mainly because of his health. You look at the Steven Strasburg one of the worst on the list. Robinson Cano, not great. Yelich is fine, but he's certainly not the same player when he signed that deal. Hayward was awful. Chris Bryant was awful. Can't even get into the Franco one just because of that crazy situation. And obviously that doesn't look good either. So again, it's just signing these big contracts. It's very risky with doing so. And for certain franchises, it can cripple you going forward. And that's what Alex is trying to avoid. Now, again, let's finish with this, kind of culminating what we talked about today and the decision by the Braves to not bring back some of their franchise players, letting some of your favorite players walk away in free agency, which, by the way, the whole point of that is to say is that Freddie Freeman should have been locked up before he got to free agency. The Braves should not have let him get to free agency. Dansby, if you wanted to keep him, he should have been locked up before he hit free agency. Now, he hadn't necessarily done anything to earn that to that point, but if he was going to stay a Brave, that should have been locked up beforehand. Max Fried, they should have found a way to lock him up beforehand. Maybe it was never going to happen for Max. Being a player's rep, union rep, he was always going to go to free agency and just take the biggest deal. But again, if it's going to happen, you got to get it done before they hit free agency. I do not want to make a big deal of this because I don't think it's a big deal. But the Braves have canceled the FanFest for this year. It's the biggest event of the year for fans to be able to interact with the team and get to know the players better. It's also a great chance for media people like myself to get good quotes for the upcoming season, and it's a good chance for fans to get excited about the upcoming season. Say you do nothing all off season and you just sign the Brian De La Cruzes of the world. Well, you can still pump up your team at the FanFest and get fans excited and interested. Go read the comments from the blue screen on this announcement that the Braves put out on social media. And you're going to see why I had to have this conversation today, because there are so many fans that are upset. And look, you might think it's ridiculous, and some of it is, but there's a lot of fans out there who are really hurt by what the Braves have done and not bringing back some of their favorite players, not signing some big free agents. And now you cancel the one event of the year where fans have the ability to have access to the players and get to know them. Fans are rightfully hurt by a lot of that. Now, some of it is taken to the extreme. I don't think this is a situation where the Braves are trying to save money. If anything, they're losing money because they make a lot of this FanFest with merchandise, people who sign up to pay to get autographs. That is a moneymaker for them, and they're losing that revenue. So this is not something they're doing because they're trying to cut money or save money. I don't buy into that. But again, it's not a good look for the fans' perspective, in my opinion. It's not a good look for how you're treating your fan base. And I get it, and I get the reason, and it may be valid. The fact that they got a lot of construction going on to try to get ready for the All-Star game being there this year. Maybe. You couldn't find another way around that. That it's hard for me to believe. You got some smart people up there. You could not find a way to do that. You couldn't have it at Gwinnett. Like, there's a way you can. This is your opportunity to get your fans invested and to give some access to your players from fans that you just don't get any other. It's a one time of the year that you really get that, and you take that away. You couldn't find a way around that to still give the fans access. It's hard for me to buy that. And again, I'm not somebody that goes to FanFest. I'm looking forward to going to it in the future because now my kids are getting to that age where I think they'd really enjoy it. But I hear from so many people that love going to that, and that's been taken away from them. And it's just, it's a really hard pill to swallow, I think, as a fan, with everything else that we've seen so far, with not signing free agents, with letting all these players go. The Braves have gotten over 3 million in attendance the last 3 years. They barely kind of got over it last year. If Alex doesn't, if they get to the end of the offseason and Brian De La Cruz is the big move for the outfield, Ian Anderson and Bryce Elder are your 4th or 5th starters, which I don't think is going to happen. But if that were to be the case, I think fan interest is going to be hurt to begin the season. Now, the team plays well. Everybody stays healthy. Acuna comes back, and Acuna, Strider. Fans are going to go out because it's still an exciting team to watch. But again, after you've seen Freddie leave, Dansby leave, Fried leave, 3 straight first-round exits in the postseason, not spending a lot of money this offseason, if that ends up being the case, you're going to tell me fans don't have a reason to be upset, to not be as invested, and you take away this event from them? Again, I think some of it is overboard, but I do think fans have a reason to be upset with how things have played out this offseason and over the last few years. And there's a lot of time left. As I said on last several podcasts, there's a lot of time left. And Alex can certainly change that. But he needs something big here because, again, go read the comments. And I know somebody said Braves fans are always angry. Fans in general can always be angry, but I believe this is justified. I believe this is somewhat justified with what has transpired over the last 3 to 4 years, with the early round exits, with seeing your franchise players walk and not spending a lot of money in free agency, not doing much so far this year. I think you have a reason to be upset. So I'm very curious in that. Look, I'm excited. I can't wait till we get to spring training. I can't wait to watch this team. I'm not saying this is me, but I can understand people being frustrated with this team right now, with this front office. Again, some of it's not justified and some of it is too far, but I get it. I understand. And let me know your feelings in the comment section. Again, some of it is too far, saying that the Braves are cheap, AA is trash. I don't believe any of that, but I do feel like you have a right to be a little upset with the way things have gone over the last several years. So let me know your feelings in the comment section below. If you are upset, what is your reason? Is it because they're not spending money? Is it because they're not bringing back franchise players? Is it because of the early round exits in the postseason in the last 3 years? Don't just tell me, that the Braves stink and they're terrible. That's not it. This is still a good team. But if you are upset or you have lost some interest, what is the reason for that? Is it some of those things that I just mentioned? So let me know down in the comment section below. A lot that I wasn't able to get to, but again, I wasn't really sure where we were going to go with this conversation. I'm still not exactly sure where all we went with it. The Braves did sign Connor Capel to a minor league deal, left-handed outfielder, big on base guy. The Orioles signed Japanese pitcher Tamayuki Sugano. I think that's actually one name that I did okay on, to a 1-year, $13 million deal. He had a 1.67 ERA last year in Japan. So some of the news of the day, but sorry, went very heavy in that, went a lot longer than I anticipated to, but continue this conversation again, rationally. Let's have this conversation. What is your feeling with this front office right now? How do you feel treated as a fan right now with what has transpired over the last 3 to 4 years, with seeing your franchise players walk away in free agency, with seeing the Braves early exits and not seeing them be as aggressive in free agency? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. That will do it for this episode of Locked On Braves. Thanks so much for hanging in there with me and being part of the conversation. Neil White, Benjamin Lee, Oogie, Boogie, Nicholas C, Protect PR, and Everyday are in here. Lav S, Smurfcast, Jeff Barry. Thank you all. Braves Thrills and Everyday are in here as well. Brian Willits. Appreciate you all joining me on today's podcast. Make sure that you hit that thumbs up button. Leave me a comment down below. Thanks for making Locked On Braves your first listen of the day. Now go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen. You haven't already, make sure you follow us on social media at shortstopball, at LockedOn_Braves. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.